Silence my phone just in case.
Hello, Joan and I are hosting our book club to talk about the design pathway for regenerating Earth. And we read three chapters, chapters 22, 23, and 24 today. And we waited a few minutes, but this is who showed up tonight. It's getting a little bit warmer in the parts of the world where we're from. And so maybe people are out and about and not able to log in for computer time, which is fine. Um, so chapter and I think it's interesting, Joan, reading this chapter in the context of what we're talking about in the design school right now with the imagination, decolonizing our imagination
Yes.
and
Yes.
coming to terms with entitlement and sense of privilege and I was in some other conversations earlier today with the Department of Health, and we're talking about environmental justice and all these different kinds of layers of things. And it's like there's no pathway to survivability without reducing our consumption. We're just overshooting, and someone's got to be taking that into consideration when we're
Yes.
setting up programming and thinking about the future. It has to be within these
That carrying capacity.
carrying capacity.
Yeah. So this chapter, Healing the Beating Heart of Africa, is definitely, a lot of focus on colonization, dating back to when, the European industrial age and that the impacts of burning all the coal and starting to use other fossil fuels had these far-reaching impacts that destroyed the Sahel, um, which was apparently news to me because I openly admit I do not know a lot about African history. Um, and but it was lush, rich, you know, and totally destroyed in sort of around the 1940s. By that, the 1940s to the 1960s, it was desert and dried out land. But people are working to restore, regenerate, plant trees. I have read about, I think it's called the Green Ribbon Project, like where they are trying to plant and green a strip right across the continent. Um, but yeah, like these three chapters as a whole really address this idea of like that we're in overshoot and some of it's locked in, but and that this is a critical time to make these decisions, or we risk just a mass extinction, including ourselves. And these are, you know, really, get right to the heart of what we're going through, the predicament. I've seen it referred to, or the polycrisis, metacrisis. There's lots of names. It can keep you up at night. These alarming,
Yeah,
horrifying
I,
problems we have.
I was doing some writing, some kind of journaling to kind of work through some of these ideas. I think that idea of like how has already happened for some people,
Right.
and that it isn't this future point that will be. I mean, there are scenarios of like a nuclear detonation or something like that where there could be a real point in time, but instead of thinking in this sort of future progressive way to kind of acknowledge it's present progressive, it has been happening,
Yes. Yes.
and it's just our sort of siloing, or I'm
Not in
just,
my yard. It's not affecting me
yeah,
yet.
NIMBY,
Kind of, oh,
that sense it's only, that once you know better, you have to do better, right? You can't just continue to suspend disbelief or create the conditions for plausible deniability, or well, all the science isn't in yet, or like all the different ways
Oh,
kind
in
of tell
denial.
ourselves like, oh, well, maybe there'll be a technological solution to this, and I won't have to stop, I won't have to change the way that I'm living right now. Um, and certainly we're going to have more options, more possible futures the sooner we address these problems.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
just,
No time like the present.
kind of worse and worse option, future possibilities.
Yeah. And I can again, I certainly I'm aware of war and strife and famine and drought, just sort of on large, not at high level um matters with Africa. Um but I can speak to it just within Canada, that there have been intense storms that have caused billions of dollars of flooding in Toronto a number of times now in the last few years. But I am also aware that in the far north, they're losing permafrost and it's destroying the landscape. Like there's stuff where, that it's just become
Collapsing. Yeah.
on, pot lands, like the lands just collapsed and it's affecting the waterways um and I just don't understand, in the elections that we just had in Canada within my own province and nationally, we tried to communicate this with the politicians to say that these elections, it's really urgent. We've got no time left to take action, that we can't just keep putting these things off. And our point was, so that the one political party was really the party that was denying and kind of more aligned with Trump, and kind of at all costs, we need to just not allow that party to get elected and take power. And the idea was to try and get the other political parties to work together. And it was really a wake up call to me to see the refusal to work together, even then. And they're still talking about, re, re, configuring, working on their, emerging over the next 10 years with their plan strategies. I was like, we don't have 10 years. And they just, like, it's really, really motivated me, like that experience, because that was just between January and the end of April. All that election stuff happened, really alerted me to the fact that I just really need to dedicate myself to the regeneration work, because the systems, and now I take that question that Joe brought up, is to ask yourself if what you're doing is actually enabling the existing systems to continue longer in the extractive capitalist way, and to, obviously we need to avoid that. Not that we want collapse to happen, worse or faster, but if you're enabling the systems that are doing the damage, obviously that's a problem. So that's something that has come
And
onto my radar.
something else that came up this week, and I know we're supposed to be talking about the book, but I'm thinking
I
about
know
the
it
the,
brings up, it
the
ties in with so
Wendigo,
many things.
the idea of the hungry ghost, the Wendigo character from native Robin Wall Kimmerer talks about
Oh,
the character who's the person who takes too much, who isn't reciprocal, and there's a word for that in the Ojibwa language that is like Wendigo, and it.
okay.
But she's like, but let's use the word Darren, because Darren is the first name of the CEO of ExxonMobil, and it's
Uh,
like, these billionaires who are like, I'm just going to continue to consume, extract, literally extracting fossil fuels, extracting economy, because I don't have enough yet. He's already a millionaire. He's already maybe, tens of hundreds of
Billionaire, yeah, yeah.
billionaire, right? And it's like, it's not enough for me. I need to keep consuming like a big hungry ghost. And so I'm trying to work through how using that Darren, kind of calling out people as Darrens to be like, do we need Darrens? Do we need, the
So if they fell off the earth, I think it wouldn't be a problem, right? Like that's
well, how can
Aaron's
we
got into one of their
because
penis
we
spaceships and
we talk about, governance and, figuring out ways of getting accountability and how can we use our power, our people power to be like, look, no more Darrens, no more, we don't need any billionaires. Everyone who makes more than 999, they're taxed everything above that. That's easy math. We don't have to spend 10 years deliberating whether or not. And then we just start using, that money to direct flow funding to the things
right.
that are
The
like,
things that need
the
to be
work that
actually be
you're
done.
doing, the work that people planting trees in Colombia and everywhere.
Generating rivers
Yeah,
and
regenerating
protecting
rivers, doing
watersheds
all
and
of the
planting
permaculture stuff
trees.
that needs to be done.
Yeah, yeah. God, wouldn't that be nice? And this is what um, it came up in the sessions earlier today was it's so nice to just be in rooms where everybody's like-minded and thinks along those ways of that the most important thing, it's just so urgent to regenerate the earth. And it's difficult to have those conversations outside of this at times. Um, some people are really stuck on, trying to, that they're going to somehow fix the existing system. That's what I don't necessarily run into the all out denial of people as much, but there are people who are determined to work within the system and that it's going to get better. And
It occurred to me that when the conversation on Tuesday, when we were talking, noticing how many people were sort of tapping into a childhood, memory of wonder and in being engrossed with nature and how, trying to square that with like people who are really committed to the system functioning the way it does, including people who are successfully employed by whomever, or they have a
right,
consulting business or something,
yeah,
where they have mortgages, they have, ways of thinking about money where I'm entitled to this. And I don't want to, I can't imagine not being able to pay my bills, right? That being being in that childlike mindset was the last time people, weren't worrying about the economics of things so
mm,
much it limited their imagination.
yeah.
So
I
how can we get ourselves into that childlike sense of wonder that like, what would it be like if we saved the planet? What would it be like if we, could flow funding to the right places that, in a coordinated way because we actually
yeah,
cared about everybody
yeah.
surviving and we wanted the
People can
beavers
just
to
do
survive
the work. Yeah,
and the
that they
sturgeon and all the people, we're
yeah.
rooting for everybody. We want everyone to succeed and we know how to do it. We just have to develop that imagination to, I mean, I say all we have to do is, like,
Well, so the one guy that I'm working with on the Protect Farmland, Fight for Farmland thing, he's also become CEO of a Retree a community group, and they've got, I think basically it's kind of like flow funding. It's someone who's made a multi-million dollar donation to basically grow trees, and we never get to have these conversations when we're actually in a meeting. It's more outside of a meeting, and he's also doing 800 million things. So there's never, I haven't had the chance to have conversations about certain things that come up here Um, but I'll be driving home with all the ideas of, the permaculture ethics and the permaculture design principles and the I'm going to get it wrong, Fukuyama forest, the intensively planting forest with the native species all close together. If there's a Japanese, I have to learn and make note of that,
Okay.
his name. Do you know what I'm referring to? Oh,
I'm
okay.
missing.
It's a really fascinating. They've actually found that if you plant it, like, typically when you go plant trees, you find out, well, the tree grows to be, 30 feet wide or whatever. And so you plant your seedlings or saplings really spaced apart. But under this method, it can be a fairly small space, and the trees actually get planted, and you plant understory and shrubs and trees all together, native species, and they thrive and grow faster and bigger and are healthier than if you'd done that other kind of tree planting. And so I'm like, he's got to do this. And I get all excited, but then I never get the opportunity, or I haven't yet, but I intend to bring these things up, and because I really would like to, have other people catch my bug of being really excited to do this work.
Do you have a permaculture guild in your area?
And I haven't, I have, there would, I think the closest would be that there are horticultural societies, and through that, people can get training and designated as a master gardener. But that's just and they
I
know how
mean,
to grow roses and things like traditional horticulture. But fortunately, not that long ago, it's more than a year ago though, I went to a presentation just at our local library, and it was someone talking about permaculture. And I was super excited. And it was actually, it may have been before I started the design school. And I thought, oh, there's going to be like three people there, because our county is maybe 40,000 people, and it's very spread out, quite rural. And I thought it would be really, and you know what? There was almost 30 people there. I was so excited. It would, like, the room was basically almost full, and people were so excited about it, and so that was my first, like, dangling my feet and to know what anything more detailed about what I'd always thought. It sounded interesting, but I thought it involved growing nut trees, and I didn't really know what it was. So so um and she lives locally, and so I need to reach out to her and then find out. I think that possibility is there, and I just haven't, but it's a good point
yeah, I
to
mean,
try to
it occurred
look
to me with
into.
there's a permaculture guild in Madison and there's one in Milwaukee, and I just started like Googling it. I was like, maybe
Yeah,
I should just reach out and cold call someone who calls themselves the permaculture person and be like, hey, I'm here too. Let's
yeah,
go
let's
walk around and
yeah,
look at trees and, you know,
dream big.
yeah.
Yeah,
Well, I'm looking at the time. Maybe we
yeah.
should look at the next
Next
chapter,
chapter.
which is about a cautionary tale about entrenchment. And this chapter got into the way that, like, when you start thinking about things one way, you can't
You
easily
get
shift
locked
gears.
in, you
Think
build
about it. You know,
foundation.
you've set the pattern, and the crystal builds upon the pattern, the fractal builds out upon the pattern, and it's because that's what was the original seed idea for it that designed the structure. And he talks about like the spinal cord
Yes,
in human embryo development being, or mammal embryo development or whatever, that everything radiates out from that, and it defines the way we have symmetry a certain way, and starfish have different kind of symmetry because
right.
they have a different origin story. So yeah, and this one really got into how fossil fuel thinking is part of the entrenchment that we are caught up in right now. And that's why, like, here I am in Milwaukee and we have this huge infrastructure for the highway system that, I mean, there's all of these, like there's 5 levels of highways that crisscross and whatnot. And we either have to tear the whole thing down and rebuild it back up, or we could simplify it and make it more of a pedestrian walkway in downtown Milwaukee and, do all these wonderful things that would revitalize the community and plant trees and everything like that. And so anyway, that there are people who are like, but we have to keep having the highways be exactly the way
Cars.
they've
We
been,
need the cars. We can't give
We
up the
have to have the
cars.
car infrastructure. We have to have fossil fuels. We have to have gas stations. There's this thing called Buc-ee's. It's this big obscene gas station that has 100 pumps. They're in
Oh,
Texas and stuff, and they want to build one here. And we're like, why? We don't
hey.
need that. They got the permit, and
Oh
everyone's
no.
bending over backwards to make that happen for them. But it's like we're stuck in that fossil fuel way of thinking.
Yes.
So, anyway, I thought that that's kind of what I got out of this particular chapter. And
Yeah. I think
we could take a look at the discussion questions too. Can you think of an example of social structure that was developmentally entrenched in a way that hindered your pursuit of a life goal? Number 2, what does it mean to say that fossil fuel economies are locked in to specific development pathways? And the third question, does the current trajectory of planetary collapse exhibit features of developmental entrenchment? And how might we work with these constraints to increase the likelihood of a regenerative future?
so many things. So
Yeah.
my county has no real public transit system. And um, there are people that clearly their car is like their right arm or something. That they feel it's just essential, but also they feel entitled to drive. And and that they're they need to be prioritized on the road too. That pedestrians are just a pain and cyclists shouldn't even be there. I've actually seen posts where people have suggested that if people want to use their bicycles, they need to put them on top of their car and drive to places where there are paths for them to ride their bikes on. I don't know where they grew up that they didn't realize that a bicycle is a vehicle that has, every right to be on the road too. And they have, signs share the road. I don't know. I found that the entitlement is shocking. And maybe more predominant kind of the more rural you go, because I live really quite close to probably the largest settlement within the county. And it's a nice little town and traffic is an issue and we just get into just tied in knots because so many things get bogged down because they need to assign parking. There's been development proposals and they get kiboshed because the plan doesn't include enough parking. And the most hideous, heinous one happened this year where there was a beautiful plan. I may have already mentioned it, but it was a beautiful plan that was a multi-use facility that was going to be the new library, site of our new Paris library in the county of Brant. And it was making use of a building that's a National Historic Site. It's heritage designated. So it was an adaptive reuse of an existing building, creating community space for all age levels and have a performance space because this it was the original town hall. It looks a little bit like a Gothic church with like really high ceilings and the thick wood beam trusses and everything. It's a really stunning building that was, anyways, it's the county owns it. And so it had been sitting for a while waiting for the county to come up with a way to use it. And it just seemed like amazing. And There are some in the county that, for whatever reason, they don't care about heritage. They would just be happy for the county to sell this building off or tear it down and stop talking about it and stop spending money on it. And they didn't have the nerve to really vote for that, to turn that plan down because it was too expensive. They turned it down because there wasn't enough parking. They applied to have a bylaw exemption or whatever to that to allow them have reduced parking. It's like clearly within walking distance of everything downtown. So to me, the parking, there could have been ways to work that out. And it got canceled. So this building now is continuing to sit deteriorating, and it doesn't have a plan. And they don't have a plan for the library either. Now they have to find another site for the library. And I sit on the Heritage Committee, so I hear a lot of the ins and outs of all this stuff. And it's just all because of the car-centric thinking. So I wouldn't say it affected my personal growth growing up, but I just feel like that mindset drives me crazy. Like at some point, we need actual public transit because we've had this town that I live in has doubled in size in the last 10 years. Like there's just been explosive development here. And it's not realistic to think that we can just always all drive of individual vehicles. And ah, so, and then there's the development by me, which reminds me of it alarmingly. And it just, oh my gosh, it's just so wrong. I'm confronted every day. And there's part of me that wants to just roll up my driveway and go down to the river and just sit and be with the birds. but, uh, but I I don't know. I don't know. Like it's something that desperately needs. We have to find ways to break through that, like so people understand that that is a collision course with disaster. And I do think finding ways to talk about carrying capacity might be it. So one of the things that I've learned about through the design school is this Devon donut. And then there's the R 3.0. Bill Bowie's been doing the sessions about municipal carrying capacity, and those are really great discussions. And I think that might give an entry point to trying to talk about the future that you want to see, and that the realities of water. There's only so much water. There's only, you got to do something with all the poo and waste. And you can't just do everything based on what's most cost effective in the moment. But
when I think of the I'm I go through all these different scenarios in my brain, and one is like, we are vampires, we are cannibals, by consuming too much, we're eating the opportunities of our grandchildren.
yeah, yeah,
Like we're just
yeah,
being the hungry ghosts, we're being the Darrens
you're right.
because we can't stop ourselves from consuming too much. We can't collectively arrive at a recognition of like, okay, we have to scale this back. We have to voluntarily do this before it's forced upon us in a way that we don't, that's even worse. And
Yes, yes.
I don't know how to move people around. Like people were able to move around before cars. They had horses, they had,
Yes. I
you know,
mean, I can remember. So my husband had a great aunt who she lived to be 100, and so she was of the age where she could remember back to horses, and then they had a family cottage that was up north in the Muskokas. And growing up, for her, that excursion to go, you would go and then spend the summer up at the
Right.
cottage. It wouldn't be this thing that people do now and just go up for the weekend. But uh, sorry, that's like a whole cultural thing in Ontario. People have cottages up north, and they go. Some people are fortunate enough to that, and now with Wi-Fi and stuff, I guess they can just go relocate for the summer and work from there. But there's this culture. People go for the weekend to the cottage on the Muskokas or near Ottawa. There's other areas in the Gatineaus and stuff. And yeah, that's super car oriented too. Um, but for Alex's great aunt, it was an all day excursion. You packed lunch. You were like buckled down for a long adventure to get to the cottage. And I just that came to mind of how things have shifted. But even then, people would this would probably be sort of the 1930s ish, maybe even the 1920s, when they were doing this. And so, yeah, I'd be interested to know because now, speaking of highways, like the 400 series highways that go north of Toronto up to Cottage Country, like there's maybe 10 lanes each way. Like it's like insane highways. Some of the most, the largest highways in Canada. But it would be interesting. I should look up to see because it would clearly have all been just farmland with some probably dirt road or something in the 1920s.
Yeah, the in the US, the interstate highway system occurred after World War II and part of the buildup with the military industrial complex and the need to move nuclear warheads around. They needed a highway
Solid
system,
roads.
roads that could handle like these big things, big heavy things. So that's our legacy. That's why we have. I mean, maybe there's a similar story in Canada, but that's the map behind me. It has some of the state. There are state
Right.
that are marked on here, and we also have a tradition of going up north in the summertime and
Yes.
to a little cabin. My mom's parents had a little cabin on a lake up north, and that's where we went for summertime. But like the way that we, just think about like being able to commute 60 miles a day,
Yeah. Yeah.
100 miles a day or something like, or kilometers, I'm sorry, I am what I am.
60 miles, 100 kilometers. For
Gotcha.
the
Yeah,
cover.
that
Yeah. Yeah. I can
that
do it
there
in my sleep pretty much myself, but
that there's this entitlement to like, well, I want to go grab something from the store. I'm gonna go
yes.
twice. I'm gonna make that trip twice because I
Yeah.
need, like the way that
I
we.
want a certain whatever it is takeout and it's, an hour drive away and they'll do it. And my son occasionally does that.
And I've done all of these things. I'm not, but like we have to figure out a way
Yeah.
to do better.
Yeah. Yeah. And it is reframing. And so the good thing is maybe with this trade war and the tariffs and everything, it's really brought up the buy local
Right.
um, mentality, which okay, not for the altruistic, it's still a self-serving reason to buy local, but at least people will realize like you're not hard done by. Like you just have to use your imagination. And if you can't get what you want, then you find a way to make it, really. And that it is this imagination that we've gotten really lazy because you can just go on your phone and order it from Amazon and then it shows up.
Yeah. I was supposed to be taking notes to enclose with the recording that I didn't do, but something that this idea, this, going for summertime to spend at my grandmother's, up north, or what you're saying, what you're describing about the rurality of these places. I think, part of going away to the place that has less resources for a few weeks caused us to do things like, well, what are we going to play with now? Or, what are we going to make do with we've got these foods from the garden and this, like it's like practicing being resourceful in case you
Yeah.
ever had to. And I know that like people in my life are like, Karen, why are you wanting to like live like a cave person or like you're camping, like where's your mindset with this? And it's like, no, I necessarily want to live, this ascetic lifestyle of only eating, having my plain room with my, like a nun or something like that. It's not just about like a sense of denying myself, but like,
To live on what you just need, right? That's the
yeah,
mindset.
and yeah, like what really is
Determines what
necessary, and how
we
could I be
want.
creative about like if I don't have access to that one thing, is there a substitute or is there a way I can be creative? Because like having gone to Colombia and um realizing how little trash I produced in the week that I was there compared to what I'm doing here in the United States, and how like it wasn't a huge, and I had the very nicest accommodation, like I just wanted to be comfortable. I was traveling alone. I didn't know,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
just
yeah,
wanted to be a little extra safer, little,
yeah.
whatever I thought I was going to get by paying a few extra dollars, because it is not, the
Very
economy
portable.
is
Yeah,
very
yeah.
different, very, very affordable compared. Anyway, what I'm trying to say is that part of doing that immersion, it reminds you that you can live on a much smaller footprint and
Yes,
eat delicious food and be comfortable and have, comfortable surroundings and maybe not absolutely everything you want. I didn't watch TV the whole time I was there, which is great because I don't really watch TV here as much either. But like, that I did not feel denied in any way. I felt like
right.
it's a
Yes,
beautiful life and
yeah,
that I could totally see how people would like, oh, I could see how someone would buy property here and like live here for the rest of their lives because it's warm and nice and there's good food and nice people. So
yeah. And the mindset here in Canada, the Western, whatever West, is is that that's less developed, and it must be so much worse in its and it's less civilized and that colonial thing that and you realize like these people aren't living miserable lives and it's not so bad and I just yeah I think people think I'm crazy too about denying myself things but actually just living more simply is how I think of it as do I don't understand why people have to go buy a new fall wardrobe every year. Why do they do that? I just don't know. I don't know. Just don't get it. Like that's where I'm at. Like, why are you doing that? Like that doesn't make any sense to me at all. Your other clothes are perfectly good. Why are you just throwing them in the garbage or giving them away? You can't possibly use them again. I don't
yeah.
that yeah, we have to take like the just go buy it mindset is
Um, well, maybe we should transition to our last chapter, chapter 24. Making humanity worth keeping around. Yeah. And then he brings it back to, so earlier I talked about like maybe we'd be better off not having human beings,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
there's kind of two different ways of, how humans relate to the rest of life on Earth and what we believe the future holds if we do or don't evolve in this direction. And so, kind of getting into these discussion questions on page 199. Number one, given the possibility of an actual mass extinction event that takes humans down with it, how do you anchor your love to the world around you? How does it feel to be alive during this consequential time in human history? Yeah, I know, sweetheart. I've got a cat. There's a lot of thunder and lightning going on here.
oh,
Cat is
yeah, our pets are
like,
not, well, especially our dog is not
gonna be
fun.
okay. And I'm like, I think so. I hope so. It's green outside. That's
Oh,
always,
that's not a good,
no, I know. So we'll
not a
see.
good
But I don't hear
sign.
any sirens. So,
Okay.
do you have the supports you need to survive and thrive in these times? So, yeah, these kind of got into those questions. I made a note about guiding the succession of human ecologies. Page 189 was a quote that I pulled out, just thinking about, having been in the permaculture design course, and thinking about succession and like, how would you want to guide the next possibility. And I'm guessing because we just have two more chapters left when we come back in 2 weeks,
Yeah,
uh,
yeah,
that he's going to round up this book with round out the ending of this book with like, and here's a pathway. This
right,
is one possibility. And I do appreciate, the way the book kind of takes us through the arguments and the emotional processing and kind of, gives an unvarnished
right. Yeah, I
truth
like it.
telling and an invitation.
Shiny and lovely.
Yeah, that was a big one. There was a big,
Uh-oh.
just
I
practically,
keep seeing a flashing, it's like a flashing blue light. Is
well,
that?
there's a lot of lightning happening and there's a
Oh,
wind
wow.
right over my,
Oh, okay.
probably seeing the light on my,
Yeah, yeah, I
yeah,
think that's what it is. Because
so,
it is just a flash. Oh,
yeah,
that's terrifying.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Wow. Oh, hope you're okay.
I can hear it. It's raining.
Yes.
And there's some wind and whatnot, but okay,
Have you been through a tornado before?
um, uh, I don't know that I've been through a tornado.
Oh,
I think I've been around tornadoes. I've been driving and seeing one, that was far away while I was driving, but I and I feel really funny talking about it during a storm here, but
that's
I
okay. I
feel
think
fortunate to
like
have
this
not.
awareness of impending doom or problems is what we're talking about, really. The so I actually experienced a tornado come through and it did damage. So the tree that I usually have conversations with when we are asked to, interact with something in nature, it's right outside the window and it was damaged by a tornado that came through. It's a giant old cedar, and it ended up damaged that the top of it was like a little pom pom, and then it was stripped below, and then it tore off part of the eaves trough from the front of the house. It skipped over the river that's behind us and then did damage on the other side of the river, but it also tore a roof off of a grocery store and did damage to some warehouses and stuff. So there was like kind of this clear path. But the day that it came through, I had taken my son to the arena, which is on the other side of town, and been coming back through in sunshine, brilliant sunshine, but driving back, the sky was black. And it was so intensely black that actually driving along our road, I took a picture or some pictures of the sky, not realizing until later that the funnel cloud was visible in the pictures. And I got home, and it's like being in a car wash. That's the closest I can describe it. It's like you can't imagine more intense rain. And then it goes away, and then it went away. There was quite a lot of damage from trees down and everything. but the sun came out, and I think there might have even been a rainbow. So it was quick. Our next door neighbors were downtown having dinner and had no idea that it had happened. Because at that point, it was like when I was driving through, it was just sunshine and everything was to the north. Just so, anyway, it's over quick. They tend to move quickly, but it is terrifying. So I got home and I was upstairs, so I saw, it come through. But my mom, and this was before she passed away, she was downstairs with my younger son. They had no idea either. Being downstairs, there was windows that look out, but it faced south, so they had no idea what happened either. It's really something. So anyway, to be aware. So there was a really interesting Grace in the meeting this earlier today talked about that it's a really good year for ticks, and that if there's a mass extinction, and the conversation she had with the ticks, that the ticks might end up being our what we rely on for food if all the other protein sources are gone. It's like, yeah, like life could change drastically. That was a really interesting observation I thought she made, that things we kind of find icky and not want to have to do with, we might be faced with having to look at them quite differently. So it is all about perspective, that's for sure, and mindset.
And I mean, I think the invitation to just be in love with the things you care about, connect with the land around you, connect with the people around you, and just make the most of the time that we have, because it could be that we're eating ticks in a few weeks, or okay, well, we might be glad that we got some ticks to eat,
Maybe we
because
might.
yesterday we didn't have any and we were hungry, so
And I'm sure people would just look at us like we had three heads if we said that to sort of the person that thinks they're entitled to drive their car. But I think we have to imagine these scenarios, and think of alternatives and think of the future. Like, this is what seems to be the problem. I'm sorry, the sun is setting and it's casting weird shadows. But to reframe things and not be stuck that we're always thinking about humans being the most important.
yeah. I think, I mean, you heard me tell my sturgeon story in my in the permaculture class,
Oh yeah, I love that.
and that, like, part of what I like about that story is that um it is the more than human. It's not just, like humans are part of the story because sturgeon were doing just fine 170 years ago. And then the humans, specific kinds of humans, mess things up for them. And then other humans recognized it and fixed it. And so, maybe focusing on the ticks or the sturgeon or the beavers or whomever, that we're able to kind of get out of our own brain about, kind of in the same way that I was saying a few minutes ago about that childlike wonder, being
Yes.
able to kind of break free of, like, but what if I have to pay my mortgage? Like, what if we could fall in love with, watching a baby chick be born, kind of thing, like that. There's a version of that person that's in the multiple versions of each of us,
Yes.
and that part of dreaming new possibilities, decolonizing the imagination, being able to let go of these entrenchments, these, addictions to systems, and to,
Right. It really is. It is an addiction that, yeah, yeah. And so you have to keep asking yourself this question about when you're making a plan, when you're doing a project or starting something out, like, really have that lens of future and other, non-human um, life, even and water, and consideration for uh, beyond ourselves. The the what leapt to mind as you were talking at one point was that dish with one spoon treaty.
Mm-hmm.
That really seems so visionary, and that symbol that it's a spoon, that it's not a knife, um, and that you have to share. So this is a treaty that applied to, I guess, Southern Ontario. I don't know if it reached into New York State at all, but it was an agreement between, I think, the Haudenosaunee and the Anishinaabe, and maybe the neutral people. I am not certain. But then the settlers were invited in, and with the idea, that there's just enough and that we share. We always keep the spoon clean for the next person, and that we, make sure that there's enough for everyone. Nobody takes too much. Um, it's really a remarkable treaty that I got to talk about it earlier this week with a friend of mine who seems to be becoming a little bit more aware of Indigenous um, ways, but he was not familiar with the dish with one spoon treaty. So, but that's an important, yeah, like that thinking for like that dish with one spoon is like having that future mind, right? The, not just what do I need right now?
Well, we've got two more chapters for next time,
Yes,
what the design pathway might look like and a regenerated earth. So, um, looking forward to finishing this up with you, Joan, and maybe
yeah,
it'll be just the two of us. Maybe we'll have some of our friends, but
right.
um,
Well, it's been a pleasure having this conversation with just you and I today. That was very pleasant. And I enjoyed it very much.
me too.
And is the storm calming down?
No, it's kind of getting,
Oh, so,
that's why I'm like,
yeah, we can wrap it
maybe
up.
wrap it up.
Yeah, yeah,
Take
sounds good. All right. Well, thanks so much, Karen.
Sure. Take
Take
care.
care.